And we are live. It's your favorite insurance agent, DarnaldJr. This is Finlit Live. I don't know if you missed me, but I miss you because it's been 2 weeks since we had a show. Last week I had to postpone it due to some unforeseen circumstances. But tonight we have a guest on the show, so you're in for a treat. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get lit. All right. Is financial security one of the things that you would like to achieve in your life? If so, this is the show to watch because we have a gentleman on by Johnny Spiller. Let's go ahead and bring him on. Hey, Johnny,
Hey, how
how's it
you
going?
doing? I'm blessed. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you for being the last minute guest on this show. And sorry about last week that we couldn't have you on, but hey, everything happens for a reason, right?
Hey, amen. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself to the guests?
Okay, so my name is Ajani Spiller. I'm actually a financial advisor at Northwestern Mutual. Been in the finance game. I worked for JP Morgan Chase for almost 17 years. Transitioned into education for a few years and decided to open up my own practice and become a licensed advisor going on about to go into year 2 now. So yeah.
Wow. So you've been in the game for quite a while now.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you could tell by the grays in my beard and the lack of hair on the top of my head.
So I bet you've seen a lot of stories throughout your years. I bet you've seen some people that have done really well because of your coaching. I bet you've seen some people that have struggled because they didn't listen to what you were saying. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, very much so.
Nice. How about we start off with the story and then we'll dive into the 5 tips that you have for our audience here. Let's
Okay.
share a success story. Like, you don't have to name any names, but what is one of the stories you've seen where they start at one position and they're in a better position now because of the coaching you gave them?
Without giving names, actually, one family I would like to speak towards. It was a case. Husband got a better paying job, was got a promotion. But even before then, they made a conscious effort to start budgeting. And from there, the raise or the position kind of came in line roughly about 7 months, give or take, after that. And based on that, what he had already started doing was being more, we'll say, conscious of his employment benefits, which in turn um, allowed him also some latitude with the promotion to also start doing some things outside of his job, outside of the market, things of that nature. And they just recently bought themselves a home in the Conroe area, and they're doing really well. It's really a blessing. It's not so much my first success story, but I guess that would be my first story of seeing someone started at one level, and I've had the ability to watch him level up, which is a blessing. It's really awesome.
Wow, I bet that brings like huge joy to your heart that you were instrumental in helping them achieve their dream of home ownership. That's a dream for a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
people. So, and financial security is a dream for a lot of people too. Down sideways, you don't know if inflation's going up, down sideways. It's been a crazy environment. So financial security is a huge topic for a lot of people. So what tips and pointers do you have for us as far as how can people achieve financial security?
So my first tip is what I just stated before. I advise people understand or have a good understanding of your benefits with your job. Um, if they're anything how or anything like I was when I was younger, the thought process wasn't necessarily to not partake or not contribute to my retirement planning and things I had within my job. It was more so looking at it like, oh, this is more money that's coming out of my check because I didn't know any better. You don't know what you don't know. But in actuality, it's starting somewhere, which is one of the major uh, tips that I tell people. You need to start somewhere. If not now, when? Um, just that little bit, it compounds, as you understand, and that little bit turns into more. And it's not a case of being ashamed. It's just understanding that I need to start somewhere with something and going that route. So that would be my first tip. Um, Second tip for me is always protect yourself. Protect yourself. Protect your income. And you definitely understand this, Darnold, which is a case of a healthy, diverse plan is mixed of insurance and investment. So, and it's not a case of having to do anything through me. It's just make sure that you're doing it. Um, so understanding that, understanding your benefits, um, needing to start somewhere, but understanding your benefits with your job and making a point of inquiring about things that they're investing in. What does what does aggressive look like? What does moderate look like? What does conservative look like? And then also get with someone in reference to protecting yourself and your income, because you are the engine that makes everything go. So God forbid, but if something happens, you want to make sure the different um, sacrifices and different things that you've already started putting into play actually are able to come to fruition on the back end. God forbid if anything happens. So you want to make sure that you're protecting your income. Um, then I look at it on that from that level is just start educating yourself. Be willing to ask questions and be willing to be vulnerable. Again, we don't know what we don't know. So I think a lot of people automatically look at financial security as not so much a hard thing, but sometimes people don't want to be vulnerable. But it is something, and it's okay to be vulnerable in that space because that is the best way for you to get the assistance and kind of get on track. Um, Now, in saying all of those things, of course, then it becomes the case. We want to also kind of put a nest egg together. So some kind of savings, knowing the difference between a savings and an emergency fund. Unfortunately, a lot of people think their credit card is their emergency fund. And of course, that's not it because of the simple fact that with that, you're kind of putting yourself in a situation with the interest and things that you're paying back. It's not beneficial. So starting putting some money to the side. Everything doesn't have to be an investment because you want some things outside of the market. So saying all of those things, last thing is talk to an advisor. Um, You'd be surprised. Everybody's not a fee-based advisor, so there are ways of obtaining information without feeling like you have to pay an extreme or exorbitant amount of money to get the information. So those would be my initial base tips. Just yeah, and from there, just start. That's the key thing. Start, man. We need to start somewhere. That's the problem with a lot of people do. They keep putting it off. So yeah.
Wow, those were huge tips, and I really, really like that last pointer that you gave out was just to start, and that's been a theme on the show. Almost everybody I brought on that talks about budgeting or investing or anything, it's just to dive in and just start and do it. So let's unpack some of those points that you shared right quick. So start with your company benefits. I remember when I first graduated from Baylor University and I started my first corporate job, I maxed out the 401k that they had available to me, which was like 15% of our income is what we could put towards the 401k. And all my coworkers, they thought I was crazy. They're like, Darnald, how are you living off so little?
Right,
And I
right.
was just like, I was so grateful I did that because I ended up being able to buy my first house at the age of 26 because I used the money from my 401k to do the down payment for it, which is awesome. And
Right.
so, yeah, definitely maxing out the benefits. And I think a key point too is if your company matches those benefits, that's huge. That's just free money right off the bat. That's already 100% return on investment because
Right.
if they're doing dollar for dollar match, then you doubled your money just by having them match what you're putting into the market. So that's huge. So I really like that point of maxing out your company benefits and then protect yourself and your income. oh my gosh, people are blindsided all the time by random events. It could be a car accident, it could be cancer, it could be random things. And so I bet you have a lot of suggestions and products in place that help people financially, and as do I. And so it's really, really cool that you encourage people to be proactive versus reactive. And that's reality, because a lot of the things that happen to people, it's painful subjects to talk about. Like, they don't want to talk about it in the moment. But from my perspective, I like to help people feel the pain on the front end, where they can actually be proactive about it, versus when it happens and they're blindsided and it actually happens and they don't know what they can do. They have to declare bankruptcy, they have to sell their home or car or whatnot just to make ends meet. So that's a really, really great point. And then you said to educate yourself. That's the purpose of the show. It's all about financial literacy, because they didn't teach us this, right?
No,
Teach us
no,
this
they
in
haven't.
school.
No,
It's so
they did not.
tragic.
They did not.
So
Right. And to interject, I worked, like I said, I worked for Chase. I didn't work in the branch. I worked in the back office side. I worked in loss prevention. And the interesting thing is, having a bachelor's and a master's in business, finance class, things of that nature. There's that, and there's financial services. And you as well, you knowing as well as I, there's so many different tidbits of information that we're just not presented with. We don't know. So, and I'm a firm believer, when you don't know what you don't know, it's easy not to be led astray, but to not be as knowledgeable and not make the proper decisions or the most advantageous decision in reference to things. But then the vulnerability comes into play of a person just being willing to admit, you know what? I don't know. I really don't know. Talk to me like I'm one or two. Like, can you, kind of bring me along that? And to what you said, even with your job, you have every right to talk to whoever the representative is on behalf of your benefits, your 401k or what have you, and get them to explain it to you where you understand. That's a right that you have. It's just a lot of times people don't take advantage of that, and it's a right. It's a right that you have. So.
yeah, and the reality is, I know amongst our culture specifically, I don't know about your family, but my family specifically, like, money was taboo growing up, right? We didn't talk about money. Like, I still don't know to this day how much money my dad makes, and I don't care to know, but it's like we never discussed it, right? And so it kind of becomes systemic. It's like, okay, they didn't talk about it, so I don't talk about it. So if I don't talk about it, my kids don't talk about it, and it just passed down from generation to generation to where everybody's left in the dark. And I think partially the reason people don't talk about it is because they don't know, right? They don't want to be made to feel dumb. And like, to your point, it takes humility to be like, okay, you probably heard of the chart where there's a sliver of the chart that you know what you know, and then probably equal sliver of chart, you know what you don't know. And then the majority of chart is you don't know that you don't know.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's where education comes into play, right? And I always tell people the difference between where they're at and where they want to be financially is not just education, but application of that education.
Yes.
And that's
I talk to so many, because I talk to so many people, and it's more a point of, Johnny, I don't have enough for X, Y, Z, and it's like, okay, well, let's look at a budget. Let's talk through this, and finding out not dollars that are wasted necessarily, but how many dollars they're not aware of that they honestly can account for. It's like, wait, I spent this on this, and I spent this on this. And I'm a firm believer of telling everybody, enjoy yourself. Like, I watched my dad, you go to that point, I watched my father, and he end up making a good living, retired from the military, got into the plant life after he retired, and did very well, still with us, does well. But it never seemed like he was enjoying his earnings and his money. It was work, but there weren't, any family vacations, things of that nature. And he taught me how to be frugal for the most part, but there wasn't anything really behind, hey, you also can enjoy the fruits of your labor. So I do tell people, hey, enjoy this, but there's nothing wrong with being strategic in how you enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that, you know. And I think that's one thing that people kind of get lost in it. It's understanding you can have a budget and you can be strategic and still enjoy life and enjoy all the fruits of life and what of what you and working every day can do for you, you know. And that's where I come in, trying to provide as much advice as possible.
Yeah, that's huge, because if you're not enjoying the process, then it's not going to be sustainable. That's just like eating a whole bunch of nails over and over and over, and it's just like, how long are you going to eat the nails? Right?
Right.
Eventually you're going to be like, this is horrible, like, and then you're going to fall off the bandwagon. So I love that point that you have to enjoy the process, enjoy your money while you're making it, but also be strategic about the future. That's awesome.
Agreed.
And then you said that to put a nest egg aside. So, and just knowing the difference between savings and emergency fund. So that's
Correct.
huge. So yeah, most people don't have emergency settings. And I don't know what your advice is, but I know Dave Ramsey is very adamant about having at least 6 months of emergency funds saved up. Like, kind of what is your philosophy with that?
I tell people 3 to 6. I'm a firm believer in crawling before you walk before you run. So depending on the person and where they are, I try to get 3 to 6 at least, and get them to understand savings. Think of savings as everyday, not pretty much what is expected to come on with life. Like I tell the average person, hey, you have to put 4 tires on your car. That comes from your savings. That's an expected expense. Now, it might come down the road, but it's expected. We live in Texas, and depending on what neighborhood you have all these beautiful shade trees, things of that nature. Well, a good storm comes through, hurricane or otherwise, branch breaks, puts a hole in your roof. Now we're tapping into the emergency fund. Why? Because it wasn't an expected occurrence. It wasn't anything I expected to come about. And it's trying to get people past the fact of thinking my credit card is my emergency fund. I do tell people, if you're disciplined enough, there's nothing wrong with leveraging having a credit card, paying bills and things of that nature without kind of going into weeds, but pay it off. Use it, pay it off, because at that point in time, it builds up your purchasing power. Yeah. But you have to be disciplined. If I'm using it for something strategic, it needs to say that. But back to the point at hand, for me, it's just understanding I'm putting something away 3 to 6 months, and not become, not weary, but more so don't become dejected because it's taking a little bit to build that money up. It's with the understanding that I need to set aside something, talk it out with a spouse or otherwise. How much can I put aside that's going to be out of sight, out of mind? And put it somewhere where the best case scenario is an higher interest bearing account. And there are different things that you can get into that provide some liquidity or access to your money when you want it. But more so, it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't need a card to it where I can access it. And if possible, a credit union or something that's if I live on the north side, it's way on the south side somewhere where I really have to do some serious thinking if I'm going to go pull money out of that account. You know, that way it's not accessible. And so it makes it where if I'm going to make a withdrawal, I have to be very strategic, take lunch break, leave work early, things of that nature to get access to it. So, yeah.
Yep. That's a really good pointer. So I'm curious, what is your take on, should you build an emergency fund first before you start investing, or should you do it simultaneously, or should you invest before developing an emergency fund? What is your take on that?
I'm a firm believer of start a savings before you start investing. Let me give a caveat. If I have something available to me through work, so let's say I'm at a job and I have 401k. I'm at a job and I have 401k option with a match. That makes it even better, because I tell people like, hey, you're doing something. Now, I'm not going to lie to a person and say, hey, just contributing to your 401k is going to be all that you need. No, that's depending on what you're trying to do. That's not necessarily true. But again, we talked about it's a start. So if your start is that, let's build up your savings. And as we build up some of your savings, now I typically talk to my clients every, give or take 6 months, usually every 3 to 6 to a year. And let's see, have you gotten a bonus? It could be a tax return, other various things that'll help kind of accelerate the savings process. And now that we've established the fact that we can be disciplined and put money to the side, from there, now we'll talk about, let's leverage some of your money, 401k or otherwise. Let's leverage some of your money that's going to now be more advantageous outside of the market, so that can grow as well.
That's awesome. Cool. That sounds like really sage advice. So we appreciate that. That's really great.
Yeah,
and then the last one is talk to an advisor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even Michael Jordan had a coach, right?
Right.
So Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball, in my opinion, the greatest basketball player of all time. Sorry, LeBron.
No problem.
Even LeBron has a coach. No matter
Yeah.
who is great, they always have a coach. So the point is, if you want to be great in your money, guess what? Have a coach for your money. That's what an advisor is. They're just a coach for your money and help you to be great, help your future to be great. And so that's huge. Whether you go with a Johnny or if you find your own, like find a coach, help yourself. Because I love the phrase, and you probably hear all the time, people act funny when you talk about money, right? Yeah. For some reason, people tie their self-worth to the dollar amount in their bank account, which is far from the truth. We need to have a whole episode on the psychology of money and how to put it in proper perspective, knowing that it's just a tool. It's just that. It's not your self-worth. It's not your value. You're infinitely worth more than any paper is worth, right? So, but once again, people still act funny when you talk about money. And so having an advisor is like a third-party perspective looking on your situation, that they're not emotionally tied to the decisions, and they could have a more level-headed decision-making process and help coach you on that. So that's huge on having an advisor.
And you say that kind of just to even add to that, I tell people, myself or anybody else they deal with, it should always be a case that me as a consumer or as a client, I'm driving everything. I tell people I want to be the architect of your financial home. That's how that looks. However, you give me the plans, I give you kind of a blueprint. We have the ability to alter, change, adjust, whatever that is. Just because I'm giving or a person's giving advice, I tell people ask questions, but it shouldn't be to a point where you're not comfortable completely with whatever's happening. Now, somewhat being a little uncomfortable isn't a bad thing, because if I've never been to a point of being very disciplined about saving, that might make me uncomfortable. Or initially thinking about putting certain things aside or doing certain things, or talking about death, that might make me uncomfortable. These are realities. However, it is a case that in being uncomfortable, me as the advisor, I feel like I should be able to, at least we have a conversation to either understand rationale and or make you more comfortable with the decision that you're making. Because I do feel like if you're not comfortable, the sustainability of that situation kind of wavers, because you're not comfortable with what's going on. And you have every right to give that pushback in the scenario, because I'm going to know what you tell me. I might not know everything. So it might make sense to put X amount of dollars aside, but you might want to start off with a different amount. Okay, well, let's start off with that, and we can have a conversation later on. So that's one thing I try to make sure I tell people as well. You know, you should be comfortable with what's going on. You have every right to tell that person, hey, I need you to explain this more. I don't know if I'm comfortable with doing that yet. Can we talk more about it? And that should be no problem.
Makes sense. Wow. So you've given a whole bunch of gems, and the biggest gem is just start. Right? Just do it. So if somebody would like to get a hold of you and utilize your services as advisor, like how can people get a hold of you?
Actually, you can go to my website. It's, as you see, my name, Johnny Spiller, and it's going to be at nm.com. And it'll pull up my mug with my grays and everything else on my bald head. And at that point in time, you can book an appointment or anything else of that nature. Feel free to reach out to me, 832-723-4832. 832-723-4832. And again, Darnold, I really appreciate just the opportunity to go ahead and speak to your listeners.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you for taking time out your busy schedule to jump on, especially since it was last minute this week and
Yeah, no
all the
problem.
circumstances that happened last week. So you're amazing. Thank you for all the tips and tools that you dropped for our audience. I bet they appreciate it. If you got any value, go ahead and smash that like button and show Johnny some love that he did an amazing job today. So with that, I hope you have an amazing evening. Stay in the waiting room.
All right, cool beans.
All right, sounds good.
All right,
Yeah, so like I mentioned, if you got any value out of today's show, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to FinLit Live, FINLITLIVE. FinLit is short for financial literacy. And that's what we're here to do today, is educate people on how money works. Because like I mentioned earlier, the difference between where you want to be and where you're at right now is education and application. So the key is to start as soon as possible, because that's huge. So with that, I have a couple announcements. As some of you may or may not know, I actually started doing photography on the side. So if you ever need a photographer, let me know. And then in addition to that, we have the Boost Your Sales Skills workshop coming up 9 a.m. So September 9th at 9 a.m. It's an all-day workshop where it's interactive. It's not just going to be me and my co-hosts talking, but it's going to be a workbook where you actually get to apply the things immediately to your specific field. So if you are a leader, if you are a salesperson, if you are a politician, if you want to be able to be influential in other people's lives, that's the workshop to be at. The early bird special today is actually very last day for the early bird special, and tomorrow starts the general mission price. And so jump on the website, finlitlive.com. It'll have a link straight to the Eventbrite, and you could pick up your tickets there. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys for getting lit.